That was life in the fast lane. It was 24/7 back then. Century 21 and Coldwell Bankers, they were just huge companies with a lot of money. They outspent other people. And RE/MAX, we didn't have the money, and what we did is we outworked them.
You worked hard, you came in early.
If you were there at 6:30 in the morning, you were the last one there.
You worked late.
We had the last light out. We knew our competitors were at home, and that's when we knew we could make hay, and we always did.
It was because you loved doing it. We had something that we wanted to prove.
We had such a monumental dream that we were going to revolutionize the industry, and we would do anything we had to do. One morning, I got into the office at about 6 in the morning, and there was Dave Lineker on his hands and knees on the floor, and he was licking, stapling, folding, and mutilating mail-outs that had to go out that day. And he had been up the entire night. If the phone rang 3 times, somebody better be able to explain why. Because if they took the time to dial us, then we take the time to answer them and take care of their situation as fast as possible.
We were under everybody's radar screen.
The competitive landscape was very much against us.
A big part of what we had to do was educate the industry about our concept.
Our competitive advantage was the 100% commission concept.
People frankly laughed at us. What Dave and Gail did is they said, why shouldn't the sales associates operate just like a clinic of doctors, where they all have their own customers, patients if you will, and they can service their customers as best they possibly can, and then they share in the expenses of the operation, but they're good enough so that they could be on their own if they wanted to.
We probably had 1,000 people in our system in 1979.
We tended to attract people who were rebellious, people who were younger because we were in our 20s, and people who were willing to take a chance on a dream.
We outthink them, we outwork them, and as a result, they'll never catch us.
One of our strengths is that we've been able to respond to the great ideas from the field rather than just saying this is the way it's always done.
Bill Eccles, who's still on our staff today, he and his partner wanted to have a balloon in the Albuquerque Balloon Fiesta. And we said, well, go ahead. We found out that the balloon, and we actually got to see it, was on the Dinah Shore show.
Nobody had really told us that it was actually on TV. We just happened to see it. And we thought, what a wonderful idea.
We had a little bit of outside input from people, and they said, you ought to take that. You ought to put it on your signs. You ought to put it on your stationery. You ought to be on your cards. And that's where it came from. And, of course, in the early days, people were saying, what does it have to do with real estate? Well, it's above the crowd, and that's the type of people that are affiliated with the RE/MAX organization. Whether it's at our headquarters staff, at the brokerage level, at our agent level, they're all the cream of the crop. The 80s were the era that we really transformed.
RE/MAX finally grew up a little bit. We started very young, very naive. Dave and Gail founded it when they were 27 years old.
I was 28, so I was the old man. By the 80s, we had 7 years of quote management experience, marketing experience, answering the phones, taking out the trash experience. We knew what it took to satisfy sales associates. We were not in the real estate business. We were in the real estate sales associate business, and that our job was to make their job as easy as possible. We grew as managers. In the early 80s, we had a tremendous recession.
We had mortgage rates that were off the roof, and we were very tested by that. The agents weren't selling houses, so they weren't paying the brokers, and the brokers weren't paying us. And so we were living hand to mouth. It was very, very difficult.
By that time, we had our Canadian regional directors come on board. Well, their economy in Canada was booming at the time.
We sold our Canadian regions to Frank Polsler and Walter Snyder.
Those guys are the ones that really saved our company.
And it was their franchise sales that kept our doors open.
The thing that carried us through is the thing that's always carried us through, and it's focus. That's the survival instinct of RE/MAX and Dave and Gail and Fish and Jess.
In the early 80s, we had one of our family that was injured. It was when Gail Lineker got hurt in an airplane crash. She was in a coma for some 10 days. And then she came out of it, and the doctors weren't very hopeful. Well, throughout all that time that she was in the coma, Dave had been by her bedside, and he'd play her motivational tapes, and he'd talk to her constantly, and we'd all go talk to her. When she finally went into the rehabilitation center after she got out of the coma, they said that her hopes of ever walking were not very good. And she looked at the doctor and she said, I will walk out of here. She wouldn't let it take her down. And I think that ignited all of us to work even harder and harder.
We just didn't know what failure was. We wouldn't face failure. We just knew that if we hung on one more day, that we were successful one more day, and we took it a day at a time, sometimes an hour at a time, maybe even minute by minute. But you never got really depressed because we really believed in what we were doing.
There's no place that we could go to school to learn what we had to do. Every single day was an experiment, and every day we created a new way of doing things that we didn't do the day before.
By the time we got into the 90s, we had a very committed group of broker owners and regional directors and regional owners that were willing to take it further.
Everything hit on all cylinders.
Our growth per year started to do 3,000 and 4,000 and 5,000 agents per year. And so what we realized is we had to position ourselves to be ready because we knew that we were going to hit 50, 80, maybe even 100,000 agents.
We have a tremendous advantage because we can turn on a dime.
We don't have red tape. If we need to get something done or an idea comes, it's not months in the committee process.
That's how we were able to do the RE/MAX satellite network.
We looked at that. Dave decided that, you know what, we need to do this. And it was a matter of months from the time the idea came to the time that we were on the air and signing up offices.
And ended up being the hallmark of that industry.
We decided it's going to be done, and it's done right away.
Another big boom for us was the racing. Not very many people can say that their chairman of the board is also an actual NASCAR driver. We can truly say that.
We were in the ARCA series, the Challenge series. We did the long drive. And then we decided that we also needed to, you know what, get back to the communities.
We had always been involved in the community, but not really on a national basis. We were involved with Children's Miracle Network.
And then years later, we realized, you know what, we could do another charity. And it was the Susan G. Komen organization. And both of those have been phenomenal.
A big turning point for us was the implementation of the national television advertising program.
Prior to that time, we'd made regional and local buys, and although they worked well, the national buys really put us on a different plane than we've been on before.
If you look at the agent growth for 5-year increments, 15 years ago, that 5-year segment, we grew about 15,000 agents. The next 5-year segment, we grew about 15,000 agents. Then we implemented national television. The next 5 years, we grew 30,000 agents.
It was 1997 was the first year that we participated in over 1 million transaction size.
1 million transaction size, that was, no one's ever done that before.
And it was a huge, huge achievement for us. And pretty much right after that, the floodgates continued to open. No one could compete with that.
What it means, though, is that we have had hundreds of thousands of signs in the ground. We've had millions of ads in the local newspapers. We've had a lot of TV ads. And when you get to that critical size, it becomes very difficult for our competitors to compete against us.
Every day, every year, it's what can we do better? How can we get our name out there? And we're still looking at it as if we're new in the business. And how do we get out there and grow?
The reason I think we have made giant strides is none of us have forgotten who we are and where we came from.
All the core people from the corporation here came from basically nothing. All we had were one another. Nobody came from any money. Everybody made everything that they have. There are no great educations involved. The education was on the street. And so we developed our own family, our very extended family now.
2000s have been very dramatic for RE/MAX. What the new millennium has meant to me is now we are finally positioned with all the big boys.
We've always increased in value, we've always increased in sales associates, and we've always increased in production every single month since we've incepted.
Well, watching RE/MAX grow is like watching your kids grow. And you don't realize how much they've grown until you get out those baby pictures.
Did anybody think we'd have 80,000 people at the end of 2002?
We'd build our charts and graphs, and we'd say, here's where we want to be by this time next year. And then we'd backtrack and say, how can we get there? How many people do we have to talk to? How many people do we have to persuade? How many people do we have to get on paper to be able to make these dreams come true?
We definitely envisioned it. That was part of the goal, and we had to do it one agent at a time, one office at a time.
You know, in the 80s when I came in, there were two countries. There was Canada and there was the U.S. And throughout the 90s, we kept continuing to add Europe and Mexico and the Caribbean and so on to where we are now.
We're the number one broker in Israel. We're the number one broker in Spain. Number one in South Africa. But you're going to hear the days in the near future where we're number one in 6, 7, 8, 10 countries.
We have horizons that we've not even seen yet. We can't see what's over the next hill. And that's the way we've always done. We've always looked toward the next hill and said, what does it take to get us over there? And once we get over there, we're moving on to greener pastures.
Everybody that works here wants to see everybody else succeed. We realize that collectively we can help each other more.
RE/MAX is more than just a business. RE/MAX is a heart, and RE/MAX is a family. And I think we are as successful as we are because, one, it comes from the top.
It's the honesty. It's the hard work. It's, hey guys, we do the right thing here. And that's what we teach our broker owners, we teach our salespeople, and our employees. That is what Dave and Gail and Fish and Jess, that's what they believed in.
You know, you're personally proud of your part, but you're even more proud of everybody else.
It's when I see a RE/MAX pin on somebody and a logo in a supermarket or whatever, they're part of my family.
It's the people, it's the values, it's the integrity, it's where we've been, it's how we started, and it's where we're going to go.